Zimmerman's girlfriend is breaking her silence. We're learning some stunning information about what she says was going on inside the house where George Zimmerman allegedly pointed a shotgun at her, including explosive new details about their relationship in the days leading up to his arrest this week and his state of mind after the Trayvon Martin verdict. She's telling a stunning story of witnessing suicide attempts, violent threats, and deep depression, all since his acquittal for killing Trayvon Martin. For 3 weeks, Samantha, Scheibe, and her mother have been telling all to a local Orlando TV station. Joining me now is WKMG's Eric Sandoval, the reporter who's been speaking with her. Thanks for coming on the show, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend.
Now, Eric, let's start with that last point I mentioned. Witnessing suicide attempts. What did she say?
Well, she said that Zimmerman had spiraled into a very, very deep depression after he was acquitted by that jury here in Seminole County. And that as a part of that, he was prescribed medication that he refused to take over the course of time. She says that there were several occasions where he was so depressed that he would take sleeping pills. And one morning she walked in and the entire bottle was gone. And he was very deeply asleep, and she just made sure he was breathing and just let him sleep it off.
Wait a minute,
and
the
it was
whole
at that
bottle
point
of sleeping pills was gone?
That's what she claims.
Wow.
That is what she claims. She said, and she doesn't know how many were in there at the time. It could have just been one more left in the bottle. But he did sleep for an extended period of time, she tells me. And after he slept it off, she says that she went into the room. He was distraught, crying. And it was at that point, she says, he took a gun, put it in his mouth, and threatened to end it all right there.
Wait a minute. He put a gun in his mouth, according to her, stuck it in his mouth, and threatened to end it all.
Yes, that is what Samantha Scheibe tells me.
What about she says he's changed a lot since the verdict. All of this is after the Trayvon Martin verdict.
Yes, and I think it's important to point out that this isn't a woman who, went after George Zimmerman after this verdict was rendered. This is a woman who says that she's known George Zimmerman for 12 years. She's known him since before Trayvon Martin was shot that day in Sanford, Florida. So she knows who she says George Zimmerman was before the shooting. And she says after this verdict was rendered, he became, as I mentioned before, very distraught, very depressed. At times he felt invincible, and that carries over to the instances where he was pulled over by police, where he was seen photographed at that gun manufacturing plant in Florida. And, she says that George Zimmerman, after the verdict, the distraught, the depressed, the very angry at times, George Zimmerman, is not the man she met 12 years ago, who she described, as a lot of people did during this trial, as a man who would do anything for you, had a warm heart, a person they called Georgie. And she said she was trying to find Georgie in the man that is before us today.
Stay right there a minute, Eric. I want to bring in former FBI profiler Clint Van Zandt, who's been listening to our conversation. Chris, what can you tell us that you're hearing? Does any of this inform you in an opinion on George Zimmerman?
Well, there's a number of things, Reverend Al. Number one, we're talking about post-offense behavior. We're talking about somebody who was in the limelight, who may have enjoyed the limelight that he had. And then when the trial was over with, when the acquittal took place, he wasn't getting that level of attention, and that may have been very challenging. What I think is equally important is what Eric found out in his interview, where this young woman says that on the night of the shooting, that Zimmerman and his wife had argued, that she had left the house, that it had been a heated argument. Al, what that tells me is
the night of the shooting of Trayvon Martin. The night of the shooting of Trayvon Martin.
The night that Trayvon Martin was shot, that Zimmerman was angry, he could have been upset, he may have felt powerless because his wife left him, and he may have sought to regain some of that power and importance as a neighborhood watchman. That's when he confronted Trayvon Martin. That's the mindset he may have carried into that terrible evening when the shooting took place.
So Eric, she told you, the girlfriend, told you that She was told by George Zimmerman he had had a big argument with his wife the night of Trayvon's killing and that she had left.
Exactly, and it's also important to point out, Reverend, that at this point, Shelley Zimmerman, his estranged wife now, and George, for all intents and purposes, Samantha says they were not a couple. At this point, they may have shared this address, this condominium in Sanford, Florida, but Shelley was not sleeping there every night. They were not a couple in the traditional sense that we would know today. She did say that they got into a very heated argument about their separation that night.
Now, Chris, what about this fascination Clint with guns? What does that tell you about George Zimmerman? She's saying he has this fascination with guns and his flirtation with suicide.
Well, so much of the time during the trial, many people dismissed that he carried a gun. Well, he had a right to carry a gun. We have that, right under the Constitution. But when you take that further, Al, when you take this fascination with guns, when this gun becomes an extension of your personality, something that you use to level the playing field, that's where it becomes an issue. And that's where all of these things, to me, that state of mind was so important in the trial that I'm not sure that was necessarily considered by the jury at the time they reached that verdict.
Now, Eric, you say she says that he got more depressed as he fell out of the headlines, that the attention was going away from him and he got more and more depressed. Is that right?
That's right, and basically she says it ebbed and flowed. He would feel invincible one moment and do something like, being caught on a dash cam, being caught speeding, or the Keltec photo that we all saw at the gun manufacturing plant. The media paid attention to him, but then when that died off, Samantha Scheibe says that's when he would spiral into that deep depression. It's almost like he was feeding off the attention at times.
What does that tell you, Clint?
Well, I think Eric has hit it on the head, that he was feeding all that attention. Al, it's like somebody who's an overeater and all of a sudden you take food away from them. I mean, they literally feel they're starving. And in Zimmerman's case, you take that media away and he may well have been emotionally starving. And look, the young woman that Eric interviewed, this is a woman who, Eric, you correct me if I'm wrong, but she thought she could help him, or she thought she could fix him. There may be a 15 minutes of fame in this for her too, but I think the main consideration is the behavior of Zimmerman at the time and now this post-incident behavior.
Eric Sandoval and Clint Van Sant, we thank you both for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Coming up, First Lady Michelle Obama reveals something about